Hello, my name is Spencer King, and I have been on the journey since May to watch every single Criterion film ever made. Now, I'm currently on 194, and I had really just did this out of a whim, just because I was bored one day, and I'm like, let's just do this whole 5-year marathon type thing, watching one of these movies every day, just like. I wasn't even interested in cinema. Now I am, obviously. But back then I was just like, let's do that. Why not? But today, I'm going to be talking about the first 100 spine numbers in the Criterion films. Criterion collection, I should say. And just my opinions. Now, some people on Reddit, I shouldn't really trust Reddit, but some people there have had issue with some of my opinions, especially a lot of the later opinions, some of them. And I'd just like to explain my opinions more. So let's get started. Now, the first film is Grand Illusion, French film, Jean Renoir. I gave this one a 7.1, which is kind of controversial because it is hailed as one of the greatest French films of all time. Now, I liked it, but I wasn't really sort of amazed by it. I mean, it's great for its time, but I don't know, like, the prison escape sequence just kind of... Nothing about it really stood out to me compared to some other 1930s movies I've seen. I was just kind of... The ending was kind of... I liked a lot of the prison scenes, but I think it just kind of, like, goes downhill later in the film, and I don't really care for the ending, I guess. And number 2, Seven Samurai, of course. I hadn't even heard of Akira Kurosawa before starting. This is how little I knew about really film at all. And this film blew me away. It was great. I gave it an 8.9, which is really good for me. But, yeah. The only reason it's not higher is because it's not really my type of genre, really. But for what it is, it's really good. It's 3 hours and 30 minutes long. It's a long-ass movie, but it doesn't feel as long as it is. Shiro Mifune does a great job. What can be said that hasn't already been said about Seven Samurai? It's one of the greatest Japanese films of all time, one of the greatest films in general of all time, even if I rate it lower than a lot of films that I would consider my favorite. I can see that it is definitely one of the greatest films of all time. The Lady Vanishes by Alfred Hitchcock, 7.8. I mean, it's not really... I gave it 7.8. It's not really like his masterpiece or anything, but it's just a really fun sort of murder mystery on a train type thing. Well, it's not, there's no murder. Well, maybe. But it's just fun, Margaret Lockwood and the other guy, they do a great job. One of the women looks exactly like Margaret Lockwood, and it's very hard for me to, like, is this Margaret Lockwood or someone else? A lot of people back then looked very similar. I don't know why. But yeah, just fun. Number 4 is Amarcord. This was my first Federico Fellini film. Lady Vanishes was also my first Alfred Hitchcock movie. But Amarcord, I gave it a 6.2 originally. I might have to bump that up. I think when I first watched it, I hadn't really gotten into Fellini's style yet, and I was so fixated on having a sort of narrative thread that I didn't really get invested in just the sort of fun of it, and just, like, the coolness of it. But it definitely has charm. I might rate it like anywhere from like 7 to an 8. Somewhere in there now if I rewatched it, but I'd have to rewatch it first. But right now as it stands, it's a 6.2. Number 5 is The 400 Blows. This was my first Francois Truffaut film. And it was alright. It was a 7.7. It's pretty good. It's very slow. But for what it is, it's good. It's sort of story of youth and dysfunctional families and dysfunctional education systems. Sort of just growing up in that sort of 1950s France. It was the first of the Anton Doinel quintology. And it's definitely... I've seen the other 4, and it's definitely my favorite, even though I didn't think the other ones were bad. But, yeah, it's quite good. Not much really to say about it. There are some really beautiful moments. It has a weird sort of zoom in shot at the ending. But, yeah, it's not bad at all. And after that is Beauty and the Beast by Jean Cocteau, who is an artist. I actually quite like. I've seen a lot of his artwork, and I actually quite like it. It's pretty cool looking, kind of weirdly sort of Picasso inspired. I don't know, but Beauty and the Beast, I think this was the first movie made about the fairy tale Beauty and the Beast. 7.3. The makeup looks really good for the time it was created. I was laughing whenever the Beast said Belle, you know. I gave it a 7.3. I might have already said that, but yeah, it's just kind of charming. It's not really amazing, but it definitely has charm. It has a very cheesy ending, but I liked it for what it is. And number 7, A Night to Remember, 8.3. I like this one actually slightly better than James Cameron's The Titanic. I just think it's a very charming first effort of like an early disaster movie. A lot of it is realistic to some of the accounts of historical events. You can definitely tell that it's a movie, though. A lot of the scenes you're like, yeah, I understand. Like you can definitely tell the use of models. You can definitely tell like there's a string pulling a table when it's supposed to be falling down. You can definitely tell that. But it's just really good first effort of a sort of disaster movie, yeah. And it's an all-around good time. Well, maybe not for the people there, but, you know, just as a viewing experience. Number 8 and number 9 are John Woo, The Killer, and Hard Boiled, kind of together as these sort of gung-fu movies. Not really privy about these, honestly. I don't think they're bad. Just like that sort of gun action is really not for me. Some of the stories are the story in The Killer is kind of hard to follow, for me at least. And Hard Boiled is very silly, and it's not a lot of Hong Kong silly movies are really not for me. I don't know. It certainly has its place in cinema, just not for me. I give The Killer a 6.1 and Hard Boiled 5.6. Walkabout is an Australian movie by who's it by? He did some other famous things. There's 2 Australian directors that are kind of famous. Is this a Peter Weir movie? Or no, I don't think it's Peter. It's a Nicholas Roeg movie. Yeah. I really like the concept of it. You know, sort of like children being lost and finding like an Aboriginal person that helps them guide them on their way. It's a really good concept, but the acting is just really not that good at all. It's still, I still liked it. I still liked the movie. But I think the execution could have been better. I get the editing choices, but I'm just not really a fan of that really fast-paced editing, blah, 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 blah. It's just really disorienting, and maybe that's the point. Not for me, really, the editing. But there's also, like, animal slaughter in this movie and naked children, which is weird. But it has a certain amount of charm to it. And, you know, it's not boring. It's very entertaining. I didn't hate it at all. So, it's good. Alright, number 11 is The Seventh Seal. First Ingmar Bergman movie. I've heard of this movie before. I've seen it referenced in things. I gave it an 8.7. The dialogue is really good in this movie. I really like the chess scenes with death. The execution scene with the girl, probably my favorite part of the movie. Just like when he's talking to when she's talking to Antoine Bloch about Antonius Bloch about death and stuff like that. Some of the minor characters I felt like could have been utilized better, but still a really immaculate movie. Definitely, I understand why it's considered great. Number 12 is This Is Spinal Tap, which is Rob Reiner, I think, directed it, and it was... Who's the guy that wrote it? It's kind of famous. I'm forgetting his name. But really funny mockumentary. This was my favorite so far of it. Of the first 12. I gave it a 9.0. You know, it's just... Michael McKean does a great job as the main guy. You know, the jokes with the drummer. Every joke lands really well. It does feel... There's some long periods where there aren't many jokes, which is why it's rated as a 9.0 and not like a 10. But it's still a very funny sort of mockumentary type thing. So, yeah. Number 13, Silence of the Lambs. A classic that I hadn't seen before. which I gave an 8.5. A really great movie. There's not much that needs to be said about it. The only reason it isn't higher is just because some of the scenes were very unintentionally goofy, especially when he's going... The acting is great, though. You know, the story is great, if not a bit silly at times, but it is very enjoyable. Now, the Samurai trilogy, the first two films, are kind of boring, kind of just, like, meandering. I gave them a 4.8 and 4.9 respectively. Really didn't care for them. The third movie, which I gave a 6.5, a lot more involved, a lot of more things happening, more action, just like what I wish the first and second movies could have been. I still didn't think it was amazing, but it was definitely a lot better, in my opinion, than the first and second movie. Yeah. I don't think it was anything special, but it wasn't bad. Sallow, here's a controversial one. I gave it an 8.6, which this film is very controversial just because it's, like, very, like, degrading and just, like, derogatory. I can't find the right word for it, just like, deranged, I guess. But it's a really good critique on fascism, and there's not a lot you can really knock about the movie. It escalates in a great fashion. The shock scenes are done really well, and it has a good message. I really like the scene where the guy's pumping it, you know, throwing the fist in the air. I thought that was very powerful. Some of it is a lot of the stuff with the poo-poo is very unintentionally funny, but it's still great for what it is. And number 18, The Naked Kiss, which is a story about a prostitute who does something, you know, I'm not going to spoil it, but 5.4. It's entertaining. It's by Samuel Fuller, but I wouldn't call it, like, great. It's very cheesy, very of its time, which is certainly something, and it ends, like, very sillily. But I still had a good time watching it. I wasn't bored by it, and it certainly has some characteristics I like. And Shock Quarter, also by Samuel Fuller, which I thought was better than The Naked Kiss. Not a great movie, 6.5. It's very goofy. It's about, like, it's set in an insane asylum. And it's kind of a movie that's kind of, like, so bad it's good in some aspects. It's like, it's just a really good time, you know. It's unintentionally funny in the best ways. Just, I would recommend watching it, even though I only gave it a 6.5. Number 20, Sid and Nancy, which I thought was actually not bad. I know a lot of people don't like it, but it's a movie about Sid Vicious and his girlfriend Nancy, which in real life he killed her. And I thought I gave it a 7.5, and I thought it did a really good portrayal of this sort of like rock star decay of just, like, emotions, and how, like, famous people can just completely collapse under fame and just all this pressure. Now, I did not care for the ending. It wraps up really quickly. If you look at Sid Vicious's life, it's just like, oh, he killed her, and then it's just, like, kind of the end. I wish it really went into more of that. And also, a lot of the film is kind of samey. A lot of the film is generally Sid Vicious running around being a degenerate. But for what it is, it's not bad. Now, Dead Ringers, I gave a 7.9. This was my first Cronenberg movie, and I really liked it. I liked it quite a lot. The vast majority of the movie, I think, was excellent. You know, Jeremy Irons does a great job at making you believe that he's two different people. You know, the dialogue is really great. The story is engaging. Really disappointed in the ending, though. You know, it's not a bad ending, but it kind of leaves you thinking, like, that's it? Oh, okay, you know. And then it just kind of ends, and you're like, Yeah, I hate when that happens with movies, because I was really hoping to give this, like, a 9. But still, the majority of the film is really great. Summertime, first David Lean film I've seen, I believe, which I gave a 7.0. I really like the bits where she's just walking around Italy and just, like, experiencing life. I think it's very charming. And I say that word a lot with these movies, but I do believe it. But it turns into a relatively generic romance halfway through, and I was really not engaged with it at all. First half is like an 8, second half is like a 6. Rounds to about a 7, you know. RoboCop. RoboCop, you know, it's sort of action movie. It obviously has dumb scenes, but it kind of knows it's dumb. You know, it's a classic. Paul Van Hoven or Peter Van Hoven, who also did Showgirls, which I really did not like. RoboCop is just a really engaging movie, just like a movie you can put on in the background. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's really high art. Some people do, but it's a fun movie, and I would give it a 7.6. High and Low, second Akira Kurosawa movie, I'd give an 8.7. The first bit of the movie where it's kind of like just dialogue and just like this tense scenes on phones and like stuff, I would get that very highly rate that. While I did quite like the latter half of the film, it didn't engage with me as much as the first half, where it's just that tension and then it becomes like a sort of like movie like trying to figure out where they are. It's still really well done, but not as engaging as the first half. Still a very great movie by all respects. And 25 is Alphaville. This is my first Godard film. Didn't care for it, really. I gave it a 5.0. It's very unintentionally goofy, maybe slightly intentionally goofy knowing Godard. But it's very full of itself. It's this weird sort of low-budget sci-fi, and a lot of it doesn't work. The voice of, like, the computer is just very silly. It's interesting, and it is certainly captivating, but I don't know, it just really didn't do much for me. Alright, number 26 is The Long Good Friday, which I gave a 6.9. Not bad, not necessarily amazing. It's got Bob Hoskins. It's just kind of a generic mob movie. I really don't have much to say about it. You know, it's kind of just a movie. That's all I really have to say. 27, Flesh for Frankenstein, and 28, Blood for Dracula. Both, what's the guy's name? What's the guy? You know the guy. Paul Morrissey movies, who I believe was a friend of Andy Warhol. And Flesh for Frankenstein, I liked more, definitely. I gave it an 8.0. You know, I think it's this sort of like weird sort of horror thing. There's a lot of blood and guts, and I think it's definitely silly, but I think it kind of knows it's silly, and it definitely runs with it. There's definitely some very, like, goofy scenes. Blood for Dracula, which I gave a 7.6, is kind of the same thing, but to a lesser extent. You know, most of the film is just kind of but it does have a really great ending, if you know the ending. It's captivating, but not as great as Flesh for Frankenstein, in my opinion. I don't know if I'd call either of these films good films, but I really enjoyed my time watching them, and so that's why I ranked it high. And here is where we get into a really controversial one. Number 29, Picnic at Hanging Rock, which I gave a 2.1. Now, I know a lot of people hate that opinion. Listen, I get it. The music is great, and the cinematography is also pretty good. But it's very slow. Like, it's about two girls that go missing, and a lot of the film, I think, is really fussing about the whole time. Not much interesting happens throughout the film. Some people think it's, like, terrifying, which I don't really get. Like, it's the most haunting film of all time because they never find them in the end. But the whole point of the film, you're just kind of wondering what the point is, and for me at least, and it ends just really it ends, it's one of the most blue balls ending of all time, and it kind of just pissed me off. Now, is it objectively a 2.1? Probably not. It has a lot, but for me, I really just hated how it goes really nowhere, and the acting also isn't great. It's just, maybe if you're into more sort of these types of slow burn, sort of mystery type movies that kind of have ambiguous endings, I could understand someone really enjoying it, but nothing about it worked for me at all. Which is by Peter Weir, by the way, who did Truman Show, which I really liked. And he also did The Last Wave, which I also thought was pretty good. It's also in the Criterion Collection. Just nothing about it really cared for me. I really didn't care for it at all. Like, I was really bored by it. Just no scene really stuck out in my mind. I don't know. I know that's controversial, but, you know, every once in a while, you're allowed to have a controversial movie opinion, you know. People should have controversial movie opinions. If you have the same opinions as everyone else, that's boring. M. It's my first Fritz Lang movie. This is number 30, which I gave an 8.2. I was surprisingly liked it. The trial scene is really, really great. Who's the guy? Peter Lorre? Is that his name? I forget his name. He was really great acting in this movie. I know he's collaborated with Alfred Hitchcock before. Just like some of the beginning bits were just fine for me, but the trial scene when it happens is really great. Wasn't too privy on the ending. It kind of ends like, oh, that's kind of it. Kind of like Dead Ringers in a certain way. But like, a lot of the middle bit is really amazing. And for 1931, outstanding. You know, when a lot of, you know, when the acting back then still was, people were still really learning how to act great and just all this sort of stuff. And people were still really learning how to make sound pictures. For what it is really great. Great Expectations and Oliver Twist, two David Lean movies, both around the same sort of area in my mind. Great Expectations gets a 6.8, Oliver Twist gets a 6.7. Both films, I thought were just kind of alright, I guess. You know, not really a fan of Charles Dickens, which these stories are based off. Don't really have much to say about them. I just didn't really care, although they were fine films. Nanook of the North, I gave a 5.2. Now, that might be crazy for some people, but let me explain. For 1922, it's amazing cinematography, just amazing everything. But what bothers me about the film is that a lot of it is really made up, and it's sort of used as an exploitation of Inuit populations, which is sort of like this stupid woke take, but like, I believe it. You know, woke is a stupid word anyways, but it really is like, the director had the opportunity to show an accurate depiction, but he sort of showed this sensationalized depiction, kind of showing them as sort of like animal types. But I can't rate it too lowly just because of how amazingly well done it is for 1922. And it's not like Birth of a Nation racist, but I do have problems with it. Now, Andrei Rublev, some people had problems with this one. I only gave it a 7.6. I was just kind of on it. I think there's a lot of really great scenes, but I didn't really care. I think it's a bit overlong, and some of the scenes didn't come together in a way that I really liked. It was also a bit hard to follow. Still a great movie. There's definitely a lot to enjoy about it. I don't understand why it's one of the greatest of all time, though. I think it was a good movie. I don't really understand the high praise, and I watched Solaris, and I think the same thing about Andrei Tarkovsky. Maybe it's just a director that's not for me, although I didn't think Andrei Rublev was bad at all. Quite good, actually. Just a bit overrated. Now, Diabolique is a movie that completely blindsided me. I gave it a 9.2, and I thought it was amazing. Just like, it's a super great thriller, French thriller that I had no expectations of being all that good. But I was just blindsided by it. I was just like, wow. Just if you haven't seen it, really great thriller. Really escalates into a great final scene. Although I do think the ending bit, it does get a bit goofy. But that's really the only bad thing I can say about Diabolique. Now, by the same director, Clouzot, I believe is how you pronounce it. French is kind of weird like that. The Wages of Fear, an 8.4. Another really great thriller. There's a lot more unintentionally goofy scenes. It ends really stupidly. You're like, why would you end your movie like that? It's so dumb. But, yeah, another really great thriller. Great tension in it. Some of the choices people made are a bit weird. But, you know, for the time it was made, it can't be overstated. Alright. Time Bandits. Time Bandits is a Terry Gilliam movie. I've seen two Terry Gilliam movies. Monty Python's The Holy Grail, and before this at least, and Brazil. Both I really happen to enjoy. And Time Bandits I did quite enjoy. I don't know if it's a good movie, again, but it is certainly really fun and goofy. It's definitely aimed more towards children. I gave it an 8.2. it's just a very entertaining movie, just like a kind of a guilty pleasure type movie. It ends really weirdly though, like why, again, same with Wages of Fear, like why would you end your movie like that? Same thing with Time Bandits. But still, definitely a fun time. It's very weird that Criterion decided to do a 4K of Time Bandits before Brazil, but I don't know what they're doing. Alright, the next two are two Seijun Suzuki films, who I hadn't heard of before this. Branded to Kill and Tokyo Drifter. Now, I gave Branded to Kill 6.4 and a Tokyo Drifter a 5.8. I don't really remember much that happens in the movies. And it has a problem, which I have with a lot of foreign indie films, is that they'll start a scene, and then it'll just abruptly cut to the next scene without kind of finishing that scene. And you just got kind of like, I had that problem over the 2022 film Close, and I have it a lot with a lot of foreign indie films that are made today. There's some really great foreign indie films made today, but a lot of them, just like, the weird choices in plot development, I really can't get into, and everyone just, like, I don't know. I think foreign film is kind of a dying market today. You know, for great films, you really have to look to the American indie market, really. But, yeah, the editing choices were really weird. I liked some of the style more in Branded to Kill. Tokyo Drifter, I don't really remember anything about. I didn't really care for it. But Branded to Kill, not bad at all. Tokyo Drifter, I mean, I guess they have their place in cinema. Just not for me, again. Armageddon, this is a bad film. Really bad film. I gave it a 5.1, though, just because I think it was fun. And if your movie is dumb fun, you know, I'm gonna give it at least, like, a 5. You know, if I had a good time with it, you know, that's something that cinema should be about sometimes. It doesn't have to be all this great film. It's definitely a weird Criterion release. I don't know why they released this. I mean, it was in the early days, so I don't know I don't think they really found their place yet. But, yeah, it's very silly. Henry V by, what's his name? He was a famous actor? Laurence Olivier. I give it a 5.9. Listen, it was probably great for its time. I'm also just not a great fan of Shakespeare. I like the use of models, but, it looks very dated nowadays. A lot of Shakespeare dialogue. I remember reading Othello in school, and I was just dying from it. I was like, ugh. But not really a fan. Not bad. I think it certainly has a certain place. If you like Shakespeare movies and you're really a fan of, like, older sort of Technicolor movies, you'd probably like it. Just not for me. Fishing with John, I gave a 7.4. This was my first experience with John Lurie. It's quite funny. Although I will say there is a lot of downtime between some of the funny moments, which I get is sort of the point. Not really enough for me to really, like, love Fishing with John. But it has a certain unique quality that I do like about it. Not really much to be said. I really like the Willem Dafoe episode. That was great. Yeah. And next is Lord of the Flies. I forgot who directed this. Peter Brook? Someone Brook. So I gave it a 7.0. You know, it's got like a 6.9 on IMDb, which I don't think is fair at all. The first half is very boring. Not much happens. But the ending is really great. And some of the fights near the end are quite interesting. I don't know how accurate it is to the Lord of the Flies book. I never read it in school. I read, like, The Great Gatsby and, like, 1984. Well, I read 1984 on my own. What else did I read in school? We did some Ernest Hemingway. We did some, like, books about slavery. Like, I think we read, like, some slave accounts and stuff. We did, The Fault in Our Stars, which is very interesting. I don't know. There's a weird choice. He was a kind of a weird teacher, though. We did Othello. Oh, we did Of Mice and Men, too, but I'm going off on a tangent. Lord of the Flies, not bad, not amazing, still liked it. I'd watch it again. The Red Shoes, here's kind of a controversial one. I only gave it a 7.2. Now, my thing about The Red Shoes, this was my first Emmerich and Powell and Pressburger movie. Now, I really liked the dancing scenes, and obviously, like, that 10-minute sequence of sort of, like, dreamlike dancing sequence, amazing. Really great for the time it was made, still holds up to this day. The rest of the film, though, I think is a bit overlong, and just not a lot happened in my interest. The sort of thing that happens near the end, like the ending scene, is kind of a bit silly when, with the window and all that, and the train. I found it a bit goofy. not bad. I think it's a bit overrated. Has great moments. I don't know. Taste of Cherry is another film that completely blindsided me. I gave this one a 9.4. This was my first Kiarostami movie. I didn't even know who the hell this guy was before I watched him. Yeah, just really great dialogue in this movie. One of the most important things for me in a movie is great dialogue. I love dialogue if it's done great. You know, that's why The Hateful Eight is my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie. Love that movie. Taste of Cherry was really good dialogue. I really liked all the characters, just like the sort of melancholy that goes on in the background of it. I like movies where there's a lot of driving, just driving around. I don't know why I like that. I have an idea for a movie which is a lot of driving that I want to make. It should be low budget, but hopefully I can get that done. Yeah, just really great film. Kind of has a weird ending, but it's not really the end. There's like two endings to the film, like the actual ending and like sort of the behind-the-scenes ending. I like the actual ending a lot. I don't even know if I'd count behind-the-scenes ending in this film. But, yeah, just really sort of... It's what I would consider a good ambiguous ending. It's done well. We've done really, really well. The Most Dangerous Game, which I gave a 6.6, it's kind of goofy sort of thriller where I think it's based on a novel where there's a guy and he hunts humans. You know, it was goofy. Wasn't bad. It was entertaining, and it was gracefully short for what it was. You know, it went places. I don't really remember much of it, but not bad. Now, Insomnia, the Norwegian Insomnia. I know Christopher Nolan made a film an adaptation of it. I gave it a 6.7. This one kind of confused me as to why it was in the Criterion Collection. It's just kind of a generic sort of thriller. It has one of the dumbest villain deaths in film history. But I think it's very moody. I think it's a bit too moody for its own good. But it's not bad by any means. It's just kind of... And number 48, Black Orpheus. Here's a controversial one. Another controversial one. I gave this one a 4.0. That's crazy. But I think there are some scenes that just went on way too long. It has a charm, but I'm just not there for it. You know, the dancing scenes went on way too long. It has two very, very unintentionally goofy deaths. Nothing really blew me away about it at all. I just didn't really get why it was all that famous. I don't know. Some people think it's beautiful. I don't know. I don't really get it, really. I think that's okay to say you don't really get something. I'd like someone to explain to me why Black Orpheus is so well loved. But I didn't really get it. I mean, if you like it, that's cool. I respect that. Not for me. Number 49, Knights of Cabiria. This is considered one of Fellini's greatest films. I gave it only a 7.1 though. I think a lot of the film, and I really like the character of Cabiria. I forgot the actress who made it, but it's actually Fellini's wife in real life. But I remember a lot of the film just kind of being filler. Maybe if I rewatched it, I would care for it more. But especially the scene with Magician that just kind of went on, I just wasn't really privy to it. The ending bit kind of comes a bit out of nowhere. But I really like the last ending, like 5 minutes. Really like that. I really like the characters. But I don't know. I just wasn't too privy on the plot. Still a good movie. Just not for me. And another Fellini movie, And the Ship Sails On, which I gave a 6.2. It's kind of like Wes Anderson, but not really as good in my opinion. It's just kind of weird. And not for me. Just... The dubbing is also awful. I hate this thing that Italian cinema did back then, where they just dub over everything. Stupid. To save money. It's so stupid. It looks terrible, and this was one of the worst examples I've seen with Italian dubbing. None of the words match up to the mouth at all. And it's really distracting, and maybe that's not a fair criticism of the movie, but I don't care. I'm gonna criticize it for that. Should have hired real actors and made them with sound, man. It looks bad. Don't make a film that looks bad. Not bad at all. But, you know. I mean, I understand the charm of it, but it's kind of like proto-Wes Anderson in a certain aspect. Number 51 is Brazil. Another Terry Gilliam movie. I had actually seen this one before, as I said before. 8.8. Great film. Really good dystopia, sort of. There's really good comedy. Robert De Niro has a weird sort of cameo type thing. Just really fun, really good commentary. The only thing that holds it back is some of the romance scenes I didn't really care for. I really don't like when films interject romance when it didn't need to. Although this film did have some good purpose for the romance that it put out. But just a really great film. I think might be one of Terry Gilliam's best. Now I haven't seen... I have not seen... I've seen 12 Monkeys, I've seen Fear and Loathing, I've seen Time Bandits. Haven't seen The Fisher King. I haven't seen Jabberwocky, which I've heard is, like, not even that good anyways. But yeah, the only one that might beat it is The Fisher King if I watch it. We'll see. I don't know when that comes out. Number 52 and number 53 are Yojimbo and Sanjuro. I like Yojimbo a lot more. I gave Yojimbo a 7.3, Sanjuro a 6.0. Now I'll explain that. Now, 7.3 for Yojimbo. It was quite good. It was fine. A lot of the film, first bit of the film, felt kind of generic. Nothing really about it really stood out to me, but the ending sequence is really good. Now, Sanjuro has a plot that I just couldn't follow at all. I was just like, what? What's happening? But I like the scene where the guy's arm got chopped off, I guess. But not bad at all. Just really... A lot of the older films I've seen, like, especially a lot of old samurai films, it's really hard to follow what's going on. And a lot of older sort of noir films, I don't know what the hell's going on in a lot of them. Like, and a lot of people online seem to be like, yeah, I know exactly what's going on. But I'm like, maybe I'm just dumb. But I give Sanjuro a 6.0. You know, whatever. And then For All Mankind, which is a sort of esoteric documentary. It's not really even a documentary. It's a lot of it is scenes of, like, the moon and the earth from the space. And just, like, astronauts' commentary throughout that from the Apollo missions. Now, it's really a beautiful film. Not really something for me, but I did like it, actually. I gave it an 8.1. I could understand a world where someone would give this a 10.0. I think that's a very valid opinion. It might be the correct opinion, actually. But it is slow for what it is, but if you like sort of movies that are slow and beautiful like that, you'd really like For All Mankind. Now, 55 is The Unbearable Lightness of Being. This has Daniel Day-Lewis. It's way too long, and the story just kind of goes all over the place. I gave it a 4.5. There are some good scenes in there, but just not a lot to keep my attention. I really don't remember much of it. Not very memorable. And it has kind of a silly ending, too. Number 56 is The 39 Steps, which is a pretty good Alfred Hitchcock movie. I gave it 7.3. It's got some interesting spy stuff in there. I like the scenes near the end. The romance is, you know, it's typical romance back then. All the romance movies back then were pretty, like, really. Except some of the screwball comedies are alright, but, like, the serious romances I really don't care for from, like, the 50s and 40s and 30s. But... yeah, not bad. I don't remember much of it, but I remember it being not bad. Now, Charade is a Stanley Donen movie. This is the first Donen movie I've seen. I think he did Singin' in the Rain, which is a classic. I had the opportunity of seeing it at the Amherst Cinema, but I kind of missed it. Amherst Cinema is a theater that's kind of close to me. That they play a lot of indie, foreign, and sort of just like critically acclaimed, just like really good like indie theater. I've been going over there a lot, but now that I got a new job, I haven't been able to go up there as much as I could. But I saw some Criterion movies there. I saw House there, which I'll get to. I really liked it. I think I saw another one, but I forgot. Oh yeah, I saw In the Mood for Love, which was pretty good. I think it's a bit overrated, but I'll talk about that in my next video once I get to spy number 200. Yeah, but Charade, just a fun movie. It's got George Kennedy, who I only know from The Naked Gun. Yeah, it's a bit silly sometimes, but I think it kind of works with the film. It's just fun. Fun little sort of like mystery thriller type weird thing. I think Audrey Hepburn. I don't know all these old actresses and actors. They all look the same to me. Okay, number 58 is Peeping Tom. I gave it a 7.3. It's a Michael Powell movie. I think this pretty much ended his career. which I don't really know why. It wasn't terrible. Maybe it was a bit controversial because of a serial killing or whatever. It's about a serial killer with like a camera and he uses lead. It's a bit goofy. There are some great scenes of dialogue. A lot of the film is just kind of though for me. Now, The Night Porter, which I gave a 3.4, I'd honestly give it, I might have to give it a lower score. It's like Nazi smut, really. It's boring Nazi smut, really. That's the best way to describe The Night Porter. It's like a lot of sex scenes. A woman falls in love for a Holocaust survivor falls in love for a Nazi commander after the war is over. It's just like, I don't know why this is in here, really. I don't get it. It's pretty lowly rated just in general. And number 60 is Autumn Sonata, which is an Ingmar Bergman movie, which I actually liked more than The Seventh Seal, just barely. I gave it an 8.8. It's short and sweet. It's got really great lines of dialogue. It's got Ingmar Bergman. And I really like how the film escalates into this sort of family drama. I think it's really well done. Some of the scenes I was kind of not too privy about, but still really well done. Number 61, Monty Python's Life of Brian. I've seen this one before. I rated it highly before. I gave it an 8.4 now. I rated it a bit less so, just because the plot doesn't really make sense some of the time. But it doesn't really need to. It's Monty Python. It's just funny, you know. I'm not the biggest Monty Python fan, but I thought it was funny enough. I liked it. Some of the scenes were goofy, and I quite liked that. And number 62 is The Passion of Joan of Arc, which I gave a 7.7. Now, some people might say that's a bit too low. I'm just not really a fan of silent dramas, really, too much. I think silent films work best when they're sort of more silly with it. But for what it is, it's probably... it should be considered one of the greatest silent films of all time. You know, it's mainly dialogue, but it's done really well. It definitely has that silent film cheese, which I'm not really privy about, but it's a really well-made film. It's by Carl T.H. Dreyer, who's a lot of his films later on I wasn't a fan of. But this film was quite good. Not really something for me, but something I can understand the greatness of. Okay. Number 63, Carnival of Souls. Now this was, I gave it a 6.3, 6.6 actually. This is a very cult classic. I know it was made on a very low budget. And it definitely has a lot of charm to it. I really liked the ending sort of 20-30 minutes. But to get to that point is where I had a problem with the film. It's just kind of nothing much going on, really. Nothing much to talk about. I respect the hell out of it, though. I respect the hell out of this movie. Just not something I'd really return to. Alright, now The Third Man, a 7.5. It was good. However, I do think it is highly overrated. Nothing about it really, stood out to me as amazing. Nothing about it really stood out to me as bad, either, but I was just like, yeah, it's serviceable, it's fine, it's good. Not bad at all. But I don't really understand its sort of greatness complex it has in film circles. I mean, it's fine. That's all I really have to say about it. Number 65 is Rushmore, which I gave a 9.4. I've seen this film before. I think it might actually be my favorite Wes Anderson film. Now, I haven't seen The Isle of Dogs, and I haven't seen The French Dispatch, but I don't think this will beat Rushmore. My second favorite is Fantastic Mr. Fox, which is a 9.3. But Rushmore, really good. Really great use of music, which I think is something that isn't talked about much with Wes Anderson, as much as it should be. He has a great use of music as really elevating scenes to the next level. Obviously, the You Are Forgiven. I think it was a Rolling Stone song in the revenge scene, and Poor Old Granddad, I forgot the name of the song. And the ending scene is really great. It's just a really well-made film. It all comes together in a great way, although I wish... I don't know what I wish. You know, a 9.4 for me is essentially like a perfect film. You know, I don't know. Alright. Next three films are part of the Orphic trilogy by Jean Cocteau. Blood of the Poet, Orpheus, and Testament of Orpheus. Now, The Blood of the Poet, it's a very weird movie. It's very, artistic and modern art, sort of just weird, scenes happening. I kind of liked it, though. I gave it a 7.8. I was like, this is kind of interesting. it was just like captivating in a certain way, even though it made absolutely no sense and it was just completely bonkers. And just had a great fun time with it. Couldn't tell you what the hell it was about, though. Orpheus, I gave a 7.2. It's a fine film. I really like some of the use of reverse shots and scenes with the mirror. Not much to really say about it. It's fine. Testament of Orpheus, I gave a 6.3. It has a lot of really interesting sort of esoteric, sort of modern art type stuff to it. But there are a lot of scenes that go on way too long, and you're like, okay, get well on with it. Especially the weird trial that goes on. You're like, oh my god, it's so long. You're like, ugh, I hate this. You know, it has some charm to it. Nothing I'd return to, though. Now, Last Temptation of Christ. Really good. I gave it an 8.6. I've seen quite a few Scorsese movies. This is definitely up there. Up there with The Wolf of Wall Street and Taxi Driver. Definitely up there. Willem Dafoe does a great job as Jesus. It was a very controversial term. A lot of people thought it was blasphemous, and honestly, it kind of was. But I think it's one of the greatest films about Jesus ever made, even if it's very biblically inaccurate. It shows Jesus as a sort of flawed man with sort of lust and all this sort of stuff. It's just really well made. There are some scenes where it's unintentionally a bit silly, especially with the girl, and but really good. Still amazing film, you know. Just great ending too. Really great ending. One of my favorite endings of a film. The Magic Flute, which is an Ingmar Bergman sort of opera-type movie. If you like opera, you'd like this movie. Sort of a retelling of the Magic Flute opera. I don't care for opera, so I gave it a 5.9. I wasn't really invested in it. It was really long, and I just couldn't wait for it to be over. But not bad by any means. It certainly has its place. Les Millions by René Clair, who does these sort of musical things. This is a movie made in the 1930s. I gave it a 6.7. The plot was kind of hard to follow, but I really liked the musical numbers in the film. Didn't blow me away, but it is certainly charming. Not much to be said about it. Alright, 2 films by Agnes Varda are next. Cleo from 5 to 7 and Vagabond. Both really good films. Cleo from 5 to 7 I gave an 8.3. Just like a really great French New Wave film. Definitely has a lot of charm to it. I know I keep saying that, but it's true. You know, this was my first Varda film, and I quite enjoyed it. It got better and better as it went along. It wasn't too pretty on the first bit, but it kept on getting better and better. I really like the characters. I really like Cleo. It's a bit of false advertising that it's called 5 to 7, considering it's 5 to 6:30. But it sort of takes place in, like, real time, which I quite like. I wish that is something that more films have done, because it's a really interesting concept. I really liked it. And then next up is Vagabond, 7.9. Another really good film about sort of like a vagabond, a sort of like person just going all around. Just her life before she dies, which isn't a spoiler. It's the first thing that happens in the film. It's just really interesting. It's a bit too slow at parts for me, but it's definitely captivating in some aspects. And just another great film, really. Number 7.5 is Chasing Amy, which is another weird Criterion choice, but I gave it a 7.8 just because it's a really good film about sexuality and that sort of thing. I think it's just really well made as a sort of interesting, sort of weird. It's Kevin Smith movie, my first Kevin Smith movie I've seen. It's just a good time, really. It's not high art, but you know, it's just fun, you know. Number 76, here's a controversial one. Brief Encounter, which I only gave a 6.7. I might have to get it higher if I watched it again. I just wasn't too privy on it. Not really a fan of the older romances, although it is probably one of the better romances from the older period I've seen. Wasn't too privy on the ending, although I think I might like the ending watching it back. I was a bit disappointed the first time, but now I think I kind of realize the reason for the ending and sort of its reason because of just like commentary about human loneliness and like connections. I might have to rewatch it, but as it stands, I gave it a 6.7. I think it's David Lean that made this movie. I might be wrong on that. I'm not sure. Not bad. I don't know. Number 77, And God Created Woman. 3.6. Not good movie. Not a good movie. I think it's objectively not very good. Just not very well made. Very disappointing ending. It has a chance to make a good ending, but it chickens out at the end, and you're like, oh, you... Just boring and just not very well made, in my opinion. Yeah. Next up is The Bank Dick, which is my first experience with W.C. Fields, which I gave a 6.4. I really like the ending sort of like chase sequence. I thought that was really entertaining. But a lot of W.C. Fields comedy, it's just like a drunk guy, and you're like, haha, he's drunk and he hits people. And you're like, okay. Not for me. I sure it would have killed back in 1940s when like comedy wasn't really invented yet. But as it stands there. Now the W.C. Fields shorts, the lowest I rated was a 5.6, which I think was the Fatal Grass of Fear. The highest I rated was a 6.8, which is surprising. The highest one I gave was Pool Sharks, which seems to be universally the least well-received W.C. Fields short. But I quite like the silent comedy of it. It's silly. It's the least W.C. Fields of the shorts, but I liked it. What can I say? It was made in like 1915, and I just liked it. I don't know. It's not good, but it added some charm, I guess. And again, not a fan of W.C. Fields. Now, The Element of Crime. This is another controversial one. I gave it a 3.3. Listen, I think the film is full of itself, really. I think it's a lot of style over substance. It's like, ooh, look how yellow it is. It's my first Lars Van Trier film. I don't know, it's just like, ooh, look, I hate films that are just like, ooh, look how cool I am, without sort of any, like, hint of irony about it. It's definitely one of those films, and you're like, okay, shut up, try hard. Dialogue is really weird and off-putting. It's just, I mean, if you're like that sort of stuff, sure, why not? You can watch it. You can have fun with it. Not for me. Variety Lights. First film Fellini ever made. 6.5. I don't think it was terrible. I like the beginning bit, but then kind of like tapers off. Kind of generic. Not really much to talk about. Now Hamlet is another Laurence Olivier film. I gave it a 5.7. More boring and longer than Henry V. I don't know, if you like that sort of stuff, that's fine. It's better than a 5.7 objectively. Just really not for me at all. Alright, after that is one of the only films Jamaica has ever made, The Harder They Come, which I gave a 7.1. I really loved the first half of this movie. It had a really great sort of like low-budget charm to it that I quite like in films. Second half, when it sort of becomes this sort of like dark crime thing, didn't care for it at all. I mean, it wasn't bad. Didn't care for it, though. I feel like it should have just kept its sort of charm that it had in the beginning half. It also reuses a lot of songs, and you're like, alright, you get some new songs. Number 84 is Good Morning. This was my first Ozu film, and it was good. It was charming. Nothing really much to say about it. Kids fart in it. They want a TV. It's charming. I gave it a 7.6. You know, it's good. That's all I have to say. Now, Pygmalion, which I gave a 7.1. The thing about Pygmalion is I really liked... the first 99% of the movie is an 8. The last 20 seconds are terrible. The ending is terrible. One of the worst endings I've ever seen in a film. Like, the dialogue and acting throughout the film is pretty great, but the ending is just like... It had the opportunity for a great ending, and then it spoils in like the last 20 seconds. I won't give it away. But it was really disappointing of an ending. It really pissed me off because there was a really great movie in here if you just cut off the last 10, 20 seconds. I don't know. And after that, we have 3 Sergei Eisenstein movies, or 2, depending on how you look at it. Give me a second. I think I gave this one a 6.6. I didn't write it. Alexander Nevsky, don't really remember much about. I give it a 6.2. Fight on Ice was kind of underwhelming. For its time, it was probably great. But I don't really remember anything other than the fight on ice, really. Yes. Ivan the Terrible Part 1 and Ivan the Terrible Part 2, either you consider it 2 movies or 1 movie. It was supposed to be part of a trilogy, but I think Joseph Stalin ended that. The first part, 6.0, didn't really have anything interesting in it. Didn't really care for it. Not a bad film at all. Not for me. Now, Ivan the Terrible Part 2, I gave a 6.6. I think the majority of the film kind of have the same parts that I didn't like about Ivan the Terrible Part 1. But the final, like, 30 minutes, when, you know, you have this sort of, like, Ivan gets sort of, like, suspicious of, like, a person considers a successor, and for some reason it goes into like color for like 20 minutes. I found that part to be pretty good, actually, and pretty entertaining and really well made. I liked it. So that's why it's up more. Now, 89, we're almost to the end, is Sisters. This is my first Brian De Palma movie. I gave it a 6.9. I really liked the first kind of bits of it. It's very goofy. Fake blood definitely looks like fake blood. It kind of tapers off at the end. It kind of becomes a bit of a mess near the end, in my opinion. But it's very... I liked it. It was very entertaining. Yeah. Quaidan, which I gave an 8.0. Quite good. Really good. Sort of 4 Japanese ghost stories. It's a bit overlong, in my opinion. But a lot of the stories work to a certain extent. And I just wish it was cut down a bit. Some of it, you're just like, all right, especially the third story, which is probably my favorite, but I do think it goes on for a bit too long, and you're just like, all right, get on with it. But still, really good. And it looks really good for the time it was made. I think it was made in like the 50s, maybe early 60s, and it looks really good. It's like color, and just like a lot of the effects still hold up. And The Blob, the original one, which I gave a 6.3. Some of the scenes, especially the first couple of scenes, I really liked. But then it just kind of goes into territory. It's kind of just like blah, 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 blah. Very cheesy, definitely dated. The ending was a bit underwhelming, although it was fine. I think the film after this one in the Criterion Collection is what The Blob should have been. So, the film after that, did I say The Blob I gave it a 6.3? Well, I did. Alright, Fiend Without a Face. Very underrated. I don't know why it isn't talked about as much as The Blob. I gave it a 7.0. Now, the first bit of the movie, first, like, 2/3, has the same problem as The Blob. It's just kind of very uninteresting and blah, blah, blah. But once you get to the stop-motion brains attacking people, it's really engaging and really fun. And it just kind of knows what type of movie it is. You know, there's a lot of really good effects there that still really good. Black Narcissus. Here's a controversial one. 6.3. Didn't care for it. I get that it's considered a really great film, but I didn't really care for it. The no scenes really stuck out for me. It had that sort of, it felt very dated to me. It didn't really hold up as well as The Red Shoes or Colonial Blimp, which I watched later in the Criterion Collection, which I quite liked. This one didn't really do it for me. Yeah, I don't know why it didn't, but I didn't. That's all I really have to say about it. I don't really have any criticism of the movie. I think it's objectively good. I just didn't really care for it. Now, I Know Where I'm Going is another, I believe, Powell and Pressburger movie, which I gave a 6.2. It's kind of a generic weird romance thing. I didn't really care for it. It's, you know, I don't really care. Romance is probably my least favorite genres. This one was kind of like, eh. It really has a really good opening theme song, but after that I was just kind of on it. Not bad at all, but not for me. Now, 95 and 96, both Douglas Sirk movies. My first Douglas Sirk movies. All That Heavens Allow, I gave a 6.5. I mean, it certainly has its audience. Again, it's a film that's not for me. It's certainly pretty dated. And it also has romantic themes that I didn't really care for. Not for me. Same with Written on the Wind, although I did like it slightly more. I like the trial scene. Also not for me. I don't really remember much about this film, but I gave it 6.6. I don't remember much about All That Heavens Allow, or I Know Where I'm Going either, but, you know, it's what it is. 97, Do the Right Thing. Amazing film. 9.5. First film that actually rounds up to a 10 in the Criterion that I've seen. I was about ready to give it like a 7 until the final ending. I'm like, these sort of characters are not really, like, meshing together. They're not really going together. And then it all comes together in the final, like, 20-30 minutes into a really, like, just, like, really great commentary on, like, systemic racism and political violence. Just, it's a really great movie. I might even rank it, like, a 9.6 or 9.7, honestly. But, yeah, maybe some of the scenes in the beginning were, I mean, they were fine. But, like, it all comes together in a really great way in the end. Amazing ending, too. Have I seen a Spike Lee movie before? I don't think I have. This might have been my first one. I was thinking about seeing BlacKkKlansman, but I didn't get around to it yet. Here's the controversial one that everyone hates me for. La Ventura at a 1.4. That's bad. People are like, oh, that's a classic. You suck. Listen, I get the cinematography is great. Whatever. But the story, man. The story! Come on! The first half of the film, well, it's very similar to, Picnic at Hanging Rock in some aspects. First half of the film, a girl goes missing. And a lot of it is just them walking around on rocks looking for her. You're like, alright, get on with it. Really, not much happens throughout the film. I mean, if you like cinematography and you like long shots, I guess, but I don't get it. The plot is not good at all. Really, I don't think so. It's goes nowhere, and the second half is even worse than the first half because it's not even the same film. The second half, it just turns into a weird romance. There are characters in the film that don't do anything and just kind of disappear throughout the story. And you're like, what's the point of it? This was my first Antonioni film. Not impressed at all. Did not care for it at all. It ends abruptly. They never find the girl, which in some films might be good, but this film, it just felt lazy. It felt like it didn't complete the story. It just kind of gave up. Very little works about this film except the cinematography. There are long shots that go on way too long. You're like, get on with it, for me at least. I don't get it. I really don't get why this film is considered great. It's like number 70 in Sight and Sound. I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Every time someone has tried to explain this film to me, I'm like, yeah, but what about the plot? You're like, oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, but what about the plot, man? What about the plot? That's like the most important part of a film. I don't know. Yes. I know it's my most controversial take, but I stand by it. If someone can explain to me anything other than, like, all I care, the biggest, most important part of a film to me is the plot. You're not... Unless it's sort of like a goofy, lighthearted movie where it doesn't need, like, a strong plot, like Playtime, which I really liked. Yeah. Don't understand it at all. I think it sucked. I think everyone else is crazy, and I'm the smart one. I'm the really cool one. Just kidding. I had too much coffee today, if you can't tell. Sometimes people think I'm a crackhead because I'm just bouncing about around the walls. Alright, Gimme Shelter. This is a documentary about sort of like the Rolling Stones concert that ended with like the Hells Angels and the death of that black guy. I forgot his name. I gave it a 6.7. Yeah, I'm not a fan of really concert films. Well, a lot of the music... I'm not a fan of Rolling Stones, I should say. And most concert films I don't really care about. You know, definitely has its place in history. I don't know. Not really a fan of it. And the final film, number 100. It's not even a film. It's a bunch of music videos. It's a very weird Criterion release. They're like, hey, how about we would just release a bunch of Beastie Boys music videos? It's the Beastie Boys video anthology, which I couldn't find online, so I had to buy it. Let me get it. Ugh. Here it is. It came with a cool poster, which my sister has in her room. And also I have the Rushmore one. And, ooh. This one is a very late Criterion release. But it's one of my favorite films. Oh, you probably can't hear me. This one is a very late Criterion release. Still one of my favorite films. It's True Stories by David Byrne. I really love the Talking Heads, really love David Byrne. So that's why I picked it out. And I watched it with my family, and they enjoyed it. They thought it was weird, though. But the Beastie Boys video anthology, I want to get more Criterion Blu-rays, but I don't have enough money, and I need to start a retirement account. Beastie Boys video anthology, you know, if you like the Beastie Boys, it's there. Two of them I really liked. I gave it a 7.0. A lot of the music videos are just kind of them singing and like in a band, and they're like not really creative. But two of them, the Body Movin' one, and I forgot the name of the first one, their most famous hit. It kind of has that beat, and it's like, I like those ones. The other ones, I was just like, yeah, this is the kind of people singing. Not bad at all. I kind of have a hunchback. You see that? Look at that. Oh, that looks bad. Yes. Oh, that's bad. I need to see a chiropractor. Also need to lose weight. I'm working on it. I'll get a gym membership once I get my first paycheck. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Beastie Boys, you know, if you like the Beastie Boys, pick this up. They haven't upgraded it to Blu-ray, probably never will, but it's what it is. And that's it. I'll come back to you ranking 101 to 200 once I get around to it. I'm almost done with it. There's probably like 7 movies I haven't seen. I'm on like 194. Did I say I was gonna see Contempt at the Amherst Cinema when they play it in November, and if I'm not working, and what's the other one? The Brackage. I need money because I was in between jobs and I ran out of money. But my first paycheck, I'll definitely pick up the Brackage box set. I'll probably hate it. What I've seen of Brackage, it's probably gonna be at the very bottom. Honestly, it doesn't seem like something I'd enjoy. That sort of modern stuff. I shouldn't say garbage because I guess it has a place in art history, you know. But I'll probably hate it, and it's like 4 hours long, and I'm not looking forward to watching it. But I'll watch it just for completion's sake. All right. Well, this was fun. I like talking about movies. I know some of my takes are unpopular, but thank you for sticking around and watching them. Have a good day.